The Jazz most likely won't be lifting the Larry O'Brien trophy this year, but who are the award winners on the Utah Jazz?
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name's Leif Thulin. Excited to be back with you, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As most of you guys know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan, credentialed NBA draft analyst, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combines, Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician each of the past 4 seasons, and a lover of college hoops, so I'll make sure you know what you need to know about your beloved Utah Jazz. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. Remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. Today's question is, who do you think on the Utah Jazz has the best chance of winning an award of the entire NBA? Today on the show, I'll go through my predictions and analysis of who would win each NBA award if it was just comprised of the members of the Utah Jazz, and my expectations for them, and how close can they truly contend to winning the award. So let me know in the comments the answer to that question, and I'm going to try to answer my end of it because I think there's some different trains of thoughts. So let's dive right in. The MVP is pretty straightforward. If healthy, it's going to be Lauri Markkanen. It should be Lauri Markkanen. You want it to be Lauri Markkanen because Lauri Markkanen is the guy you're paying the most. He's supposed to be the leader, the kind of the transitional phase between, this is the youth movement, and he's kind of the holdover from a older generation, and yet he's paid as the star, and he is going to be the star of the team. That is good. That is good. The only thing you would say is you want Lauri to be the MVP of the Jazz, barring an amazing year from Ace Bailey. Like that would be the icing on the cake. If Ace Bailey is better than Lauri Markkanen, that would be it. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves because, oh my goodness, that would be awesome. So let's go into what Lauri's progression with the Jazz has been. Lauri in year 1 with the Jazz, no one knew what he was capable of. The only thing people really were talking about is, like Arizona, he was a talented player. With the Bulls, he was all right. The Cavs, he played the small forward. That's a little intriguing. And then he was dominating for Finland at the time. And I remember that was a bit of a narrative, like, maybe he's better than we thought because he just got to put the ball in his hands. And right now, I guess it just finished, he was dominating with Finland again. So maybe it'll provide the same good juju it provided then. He averaged 25.6 points per game, was an all-star, and won the most improved player in the NBA. And that was after a year where he scored 14.8 points per game in a smaller role than he had in Chicago while he was with the Cavaliers playing the small forward when they tinkered with an enormous lineup with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. And, look at that. It's a win-win for all 3 of those players have certainly improved since that deal. So this is year 4 in Utah for Lauri, which is kind of wild to think about. Year 1, he had the help of Mike Conley to make life easier. Conley could initiate and help lead, perhaps more importantly, but really get Lauri good shots, get people to buy in and say, Lauri Markkanen's the best player on the team. Let's get him the ball. Like, I remember that being a discourse that said, we realized in camp, Will Hardy said to everyone, he said, hey, who's the best player on this team? And, at the beginning, there was a question about it. And by the end, it was, it's Lauri Markkanen. And it was decisive. So that year was interesting. Year 2, many had the goal for Lauri of more self-creation, and many would nitpick the efficiency of his self-creation. But he still scored 23 points per game on 48% shooting from the field, and he was 40% from 3. Like, Lauri Markkanen after that year was still an incredibly hot commodity that many believed would be dealt. Many believed he would be dealt because you look at the team and you say, wait a minute, Lauri Markkanen is a really hot commodity because he can really shoot the ball. He's 7 feet tall and he's athletic, and he looks to be the part of a good teammate. And from all accounts, he is a good teammate. He's a good leader. He wants to be in Utah. So what can the Jazz get, and what do they need? They want picks. Like that, there was a reason he was still incredibly highly regarded by a lot of front offices, and the Jazz were waiting for the best offer and didn't find any they thought were the right thing for Lauri Markkanen. So his ISO numbers, if you want to really get into the nitpicking stuff, they weren't great. And I'm not diminishing that as a point because, yeah, I thought that was the biggest thing he should explore that next year. If like the Jazz are going to be bad that year, they ended up starting 500 through 52 games, which I thought was an error. in terms of managing the season. But to test that, you should really see how good Lauri Markkanen is. And I thought they did that. So I actually don't have a problem, but people would say, okay, we have clarity of who he really was, what he really is, and just how high in the upper echelon of NBA players he belongs, or at that point belonged. And he at that point, and probably still now, is probably a top 35, top 40 player in the NBA. And he's a fantastic compliment, but not the star. And that was a trial run to see if he was better than that number. And I think many right now would say he's worse than that number because they're being overly critical and overreactionary to a year 3 in Utah that was harder. And it made his stock diminish both in the eyes of the fans, but more importantly, his trade stock diminished. And the Jazz were getting pennies on the dollar in trade offers. And therefore, they kept Lauri Markkanen. He scored 19 points, added 6 boards, shot 42% from the field, and only 34.6 from 3. And that's not a terrible number, but for what Lauri Markkanen is as a shooter, that was not good. The team was awful, and Lauri was too good to be what he was. Like I think he is too good of a player to be what he was last year. And I think this year represents a right the ship type of year for him individually. And I expect a focused Lauri Markkanen, a more rim attacking Lauri Markkanen, and a better shooter Lauri Markkanen than a season ago. If I had to place numbers, I'm going to guess Lauri Markkanen scores about 22, 23 points per game on 46% from the field and 38% from 3. He's going to have a harder time getting the same looks he got when he was, climbing up scouting reports and no one really knew what he could do. But I think now, and people know what he can do, but I think he's going to regress, or in this case, progress to the mean. And that is my expectation. He will be the MVP for the Utah Jazz, barring injury. If he does not win MVP, that would mean injury or something great has happened, and Ace Bailey is all-world good, and we would be celebrating. Now let's go to Defensive Player of the Year, and I think this would be probably my pick for second most likely to win MVP if I were, placing betting odds on it. That's Walker Kessler. It should be an easy one for Defensive Player of the Year. Kessler's averaged 2.4 blocks per game over the course of his career. He's been remarkably consistent defensively throughout his career. And last year, he took a leap as a rebounder, both offensively and defensively. And to me, that made him more valuable. Fun fact for you guys, he led the NBA in offensive rebounds per game. And I know that isn't defensive necessarily, but it's a stride demonstrated in the strength category. And that was something he was not quite great at as a rookie, even though he had a very good rookie year. And sophomore year, I think it became more profound, like, oh, he's on a sophomore slump. And he was getting beaten up by some guys and his confidence waned. His confidence is up. And I think if he continues to gain strength, it'll make him an even better defensive player on the interior and specific as a post defender where he can grow. That's an area he can grow, whereas he excels as a weak side shot blocker or a drop coverage big. But when he's banging and bashing against the biggest and the strongest, which doesn't happen that often in today's NBA, I think Kessler gaining strength and doing so on the glass, demonstrating it last year, I think that continued growth is going to be important. It also helps prevent defensive possessions if you snare O board. So I think that's really important as well. Walker Kessler, if I have to give an expectation, I would say you stay on path with 2.4 blocks once again, and maybe he ups his average from 11 points and 12 boards to 13 points and 12 boards in year 4. That would be ideal, because if Walker Kessler is so impactful on his own that he's recognized for votes for an all-defense team, that would be a screaming success for the Jazz. I think it's hard to be because there's a lot of defensive guys in the NBA. I think it's very difficult for him to get all NBA defense, but I think he's got a chance. And that chance means he's the best player on the team defensively. And therefore, I think he's almost a lock to win the decoy for the Jazz. The other player who I think has a chance at this award is Taylor Hendricks, but I think this is down the road. I don't think he has a chance this year, but maybe in 4 years, the Jazz would be better served if Hendricks is the better defender than Walker Kessler. But even prior to a gruesome injury, I think Hendricks' defensive skills are more tied to the theoretical what he can be versus what we've actually seen. I think he's a raw defender and he'll have some growing pains, but hopefully a lot of growing strides as he progresses and gets healthy and grows as a defender. So those were 2 locks, in my opinion, the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year. Well, let's move to some awards like Most Improved Player that I think could be interesting in debating who's going to improve the most from last season to this season for the Utah Jazz. All that and more comes straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family. Maybe it's a game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices drop on the app the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got this incredible last minute deal, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easier to browse the app for an exciting game like Red Sox Yankees this week and the best rivalry in baseball in the midst of a wild card chase. So go get your tickets and check that out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin here. We talked about the MVP. That's Lauri Markkanen. The Defensive Player of the Year, that's Walker Kessler. I think those were the two most straightforward awards. Now let's go to the one that I think is the most interesting, the most improved player on the Utah Jazz. My vote would go to Kyle Filipowski. Kyle Filipowski last season averaged 9.6 points per game. And as I stated for the Everydayers a couple weeks ago, I can see 14-9 out of Kyle Filipowski this year. That's a pretty good numerical jump, but let me contextualize it. It doesn't feel like that enormous of a jump because we saw this in stages at the end of last year. A little inconsistent, but like we saw what he could do. And then in Summer League, he improved. He looked improved, looked more athletic, and he certainly looked the part as a confident player. He looked like he'd played in the NBA and knew what he was doing, and it became easy for him. And in April, to further that point, he averaged 14 points, 10 boards, and in March, he scored 15 points and averaged 8 boards. But that's when games lacked meaning. That's when games lacked leverage minutes, ones that matter, where his impact is just about the box score because the Jazz weren't intending to win, and maybe some other teams weren't even trying to win themselves. Because, frankly, unless you're in the midst of a playoff chase, the last couple games in April are fairly meaningless. But let's see how long of a stretch can he be a 14-8 guy. Post All-Star last year, he averaged 14-8. And I expect that all of this season, and to me, that's a big jump from 9-6 or 9-5 with turnovers and completely inept defense to being a consistent offensive player with a larger role, more importance to his team, and 82 games of consistency. I expect all season for Kyle Filipowski, and I said this the other day, I would start him. I think Taylor Hendricks will start, but I would start Kyle Filipowski, and I would play him 30 minutes. And I want to see 14-10 out of Filipowski. And I think it's doable. Defensively, of course, he needs to really improve. And that's where you'd like the largest jump for him individually. But just on a sheer numerical jump from where he was, that's probably the most likely most improved player for the Utah Jazz. And that's the one I think is the most intriguing because you'd like to see what he can become. Like, what is Kyle Filipowski's skill set? We kind of are getting a sense he's got a lot in the bag, but how good can he be when tapped into that skill set, when the offense is allowed to run through him, but there's actual intention of winning the game from each side? So that one's not a lock. Let me go through some other contenders. There's an obvious one, and that's Cody Williams, because he had a really rough rookie season. The obvious reasons would be his shooting could improve because he was a 7th percentile catch and shoot shooter on open threes. He was not the defender that we once thought he could be. He showed flashes of that, and he lacked confidence altogether. So if his shooting improves, he's drastically better because the shot was completely inept last year. If his confidence improves, he can drive to the hoop and finish despite his slender frame. That really helps. The biggest thing I think is going to help him is he's going to be stronger. He looked the part, not to the same degree as Filipowski did in the Summer League, but he looked like he'd played in the NBA already, meaning he knew where to be and did not look fazed by the pace and the athleticism of the game. And that's usually the best indicator for comfort. And I think comfort aids Cody in ability to improve. So shooting, and I actually think defense he can improve as well and can buy in. I've talked about how he can become a useful player. We talked yesterday on the show on emulating teams. If you look at Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, those guys were picked 5th and 6th. You look at some of the other players the Magic have taken, those guys may not go where they were drafted in the redraft, but they're still useful NBA players because they buy into their skill set, and that was defensive. I think that's the pathway for Cody Williams. I've talked about that a couple times to the everydayers, but Cody Williams can buy in defensively and improve as a shooter, and he improves a lot. And maybe his gap, it truly is the largest improvement from year 1 to year 2, but I just don't think it has the same impact that Filipowski's improvement will have. And then here's the last candidate for most improved, in my opinion. It's kind of a weird one, and I don't think anyone's going to think of it because it's outside the box. It's actually Ace Bailey for me. And this is from point A to point B. From start of the season to finish of the season, I can see a way where Ace Bailey goes month by month and his strides look completely different as his role changes, as he assimilates to the game of the NBA, and how, he's had the ball in his hands. He's been the most talented player that he's been around at every stage of his life. And that includes even with Dylan Harper. But when Dylan Harper was out, the ball's in Ace Bailey's hands, and he scored over 20-something a game. Scored a game with 39 points. He had a game with 37 points in Big Ten scouting play against veterans, and he's 18 years old at the time. Like, he's that talented, but now he's going to play guys that are similarly talented, significantly stronger and more experienced, and just veterans of the NBA. And so you don't expect him to have the ball in his hands that same way, because if he did, those numbers would drop. They wouldn't necessarily shine unless he had some remarkable game. But I think the assimilation to the role that I've described as the Tobias Harris role, as a good player who knocks down open shots, who is used to being someone with the ball in their hands at times in their career, but has to adapt to playing away from the ball and knocks down open shots, attacks opportunistically. As that happens, I think you're going to see month 1 to month 2 be a stride. I think month 2 to month 3 is going to be big. And then the new year is where Ace Bailey is going to take off. And I've said this before. I did his projections, and I said about ideally you're going to see about 13 points, something like that for Ace Bailey. And I think that's possible. Like, I think he's going to score around 13, 14 points, and he's going to play 30 minutes. But I wonder if those first 3 months he's going to score 10, 11 points per game. And then this next 3 months, he scores 16, 17 a game. And that's where I want to see the growth. Like, is his growth from, October to December, then from January to April, the largest growth on the team as compared to a player from last year to this year? I know that's not the way the award works, but that's the one I think actually might be the largest jump. And I think players get comfortable, and someone with as much talent as Ace getting comfortable matters just as much as the opportunity does. And I think opportunity will actually rise as he gets more comfortable. All right. So that brings me to 6th man of the year. This one I think is very straightforward. I have Keyonte George winning it, and I actually think he factors into the best 6 men in the NBA conversation. I expect Keyonte George to be the second leading scorer on the Jazz at around 18.5, 19 points per game, and I expect him to take a leap as a third-year pro. Keyonte has been consistently able to score. The thing that is the point of delineation is he lacked ideal consistency in the sense of he was not efficient, and then he played point guard and his turnovers started to creep in, and then he would not be as aggressive, and then he'd be aggressive again, and they'd be forces. But then again, how many players on poor teams, and not just poor teams, like poor teams with no real definition, have actually thrived in their role and been better than Keyonte George? The answer is very few, and the only one that's really come to my mind with poor role definition and a consistently poor team around him has been Brandon Miller, who was taken at the top of the draft. Brandon Miller did have a more clear role, though. Like, LaMelo Ball is the point guard of the future there. He's asked to score. His job as the 2 or the 3 really doesn't change that much, but his team around him fluctuated as option 1 or option 2 as LaMelo Ball's been out, as players like PJ Washington went to the Mavs. Stuff like that has happened. And I think he's been harshly judged and evaluated by this fan base, but I think we'll earn some new fans this year with a good season with better efficiency. Like 16 points a game as a rookie is pretty rare. Like number 3 in that draft was Scoot Henderson. And Scoot Henderson, I don't feel like has the same, he's a bust. Like, no one's talking about him as much as they probably should be in terms of the scope of, he was picked after Victor Wembanyama, and he was, at one point people thought he'd be right up there with Victor Wembanyama. And I think that's right, that he shouldn't be evaluated because he's having his own path. His path has changed. I don't know who's the better prospect between Scoot and Key. Like, there's a real discussion that Key is a more gifted scorer in the NBA than Scoot Henderson. Scoot Henderson just has more dynamic athleticism, but the Blazers seem to be more patient with him than the Jazz fans have been with Keyonte George, which I think is a little bit backwards. So let me know what you guys think about that. I think he's been harshly evaluated. I think he's going to be good this year. Let's discuss that, because I have a point on Keyonte George I'll make in the next segment. And on the last segment, which is on the way, I've got a few more awards to discuss, and then a couple superlatives to go through for the Utah Jazz. All that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. But I got to tell you about Murdoch Hyundai. Murdoch, they've been in Utah for over 80 years. The Hyundai is the best car for your money. They got safety features, bells, whistles, all in amazing cars, all for amazing prices. And the SUV lineup is top of the line. They got the Kona, the Tucson, the Santa Fe, and the Palisade. I've driven the Tucson, and when they say all the safety features, bells, and whistles, you hit a blinker, it illuminates on the left side of the steering wheel, and it pops up with exactly what you'd see behind you in the blind spot. And then they also let you know if you're getting to a car. When a car is leaving the light, it says the car in front of you is left. It gives you everything you need. They also have electric cars like the new Ioniq 6. It's amazing. Looks like a Porsche and just won the World Car of the Year. And there are 3 locations in Utah: Linden, Murray, and Logan. I've been to the ones in Murray. They've taken fantastic care of me, and I'm sure they'll do that for you. So tell them you listen to Locked On Jazz, and they'll treat you like family, just like they treat everyone. So go in there and get yourself a new car. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here for the final segment on a Friday. The Rookie of the Year is the one reward that I have not talked about, and I think it'll be Ace Bailey. Some will say it'll be Walter Clayton Jr., and that would be cool, but Ace Bailey should get 30 minutes a night, and he should be someone that is given a set diet of 10 to 12 shots, even at the beginning of the year. And if you look at the guys from a similar pedigree and play style, like we did on Locked On Jazz last week, and we talked about again this week, I compared him for the everydayers. For the everydayers, you know this. For those of you who are not, I compared Ace Bailey to Michael Porter Jr., Brandon Miller, Brandon Ingram, Paul George, and Kevin Durant, and their collegiate stats and their pedigree coming up to college and into the NBA. And essentially, Ace Bailey compares favorably to a lot of those guys. And his stats are basically better than everyone's but Kevin Durant's in college and per usage rate and all that stuff. If he gets near 30 minutes a night, like many of these guys didn't, but then did in years 2 and 3, I think Ace should score around 13 to 15 points per game. And if he shoots it well, watch out. He could contend for the Rookie of the Year for real, not just on the Utah Jazz, but for real. And if he exceeds those numbers by much, like, there's a real possibility that he's pushing for the Rookie of the Year. And as it is, whether he comes in and just gets minutes and doesn't play particularly well, he comes in with the 4th best odds to win it per sports books. So I think it's not outlandish at all to say he could be the Rookie of the Year in the NBA, because Cooper Flagg's on a better team. Maybe it's harder to play, a less prominent role. I think Cooper Flagg will win Rookie of the Year. I'm confident in that. But I don't think it's outlandish to say Ace Bailey could win Rookie of the Year. So that brings me to my next question. Which award does someone on the Utah Jazz have the best chance of winning when it is considered around the entire NBA? So not just inter-Jazz stuff. This is the actual award. Is it Ace as Rookie of the Year, who's got the 4th best odds? Is it Walker Kessler as the Defensive Player of the Year? Is it Keyonte George as the 6th Man of the Year? Tell me what you guys think. That's the question I want answered. So let me go through it, and I'm going to answer it both in terms of the idea of what's most likely by probability, by statistics, and then I'll tell you what I actually think. So the numbers would tell me Ace Bailey as the Rookie of the Year has the best odds, and that is the one I think would be the most delightful for Jazz fans, because that means Ace is awesome, and that's what we've been craving. We want a transcendent star, a face of the franchise, and if Ace is the Rookie of the Year, it doesn't mean it's a certainty he's the best player in the draft class, but it sure means he's had a good year, and it sure means we should be optimistic. So the most impactful on this individual season in terms of how it would help the Jazz, though, for that year alone, not counting Ace Rookie of the Year, meaning he's going to be a star, would be Walker Kessler's Defensive Player of the Year, because that means the Jazz would have an incredible anchor and the Jazz would improve defensively, as we did a podcast a couple days ago. was how can the Jazz improve defensively? It's that they need to get better in a lot of spots, but Walker Kessler, as great as he was defensively, like Rudy Gobert played with inept defenders on those teams. Like they were not good perimeter defenders, and he elevated single-handedly the team, perpetuating them from bottom of the NBA in terms of wing defense to the tops in the team defense because he's that good at the rack. Kessler isn't quite there, but if he can get there, man, the Jazz have a bright future. And now Defensive Player of the Year, though, is so hard to get because Victor Wembanyama is practically a lock. Like I was doing stats for the Jazz the last 4 years, so I've been there all of Walker Kessler's tenure. 3 years, up and down a little bit. And every time I would do a road stat, I'd pull up Walker Kessler stats for the opposing broadcaster. And I'd say, Walker Kessler has the most blocks per game of someone at this juncture of their career. Walker Kessler has the most career blocks through this stage. It's random little things that you'd see on Jazz game notes. And then Victor Wembanyama came into the league, and he's a year behind Kessler in terms of the draft classes. And all of a sudden, these graphs that I would create would change because Victor Wembanyama was surging. So much so he caught Walker Kessler at one point. So he's a lock to me if he stays healthy to be Defensive Player of the Year. He did not last year, and therefore there is a possibility. But there's also Evan Mobley who won it, Gobert, Bam, Draymond Green, so many other players, Dyson Daniels on the perimeter. All these guys are so good. So I think it's very difficult, and so much so I actually did some research. Kessler wasn't even listed as an option going, and this went beyond plus 6,000 odds. And so I think that one's a long shot. Would be awesome, though. But the one I think will surprise non-Jazz fans is Keyonte George. Keyonte George, in my opinion, actually will contend for Sixth Man of the Year, just like Ace Bailey will contend for Rookie of the Year. For reference, though, Jazz fans can remember Jordan Clarkson won the Sixth Man of the Year. Jordan Clarkson is not that same Jordan Clarkson he was then, and the current Jordan Clarkson is picked 6th right now as the 6th most likely guy to win win Sixth Man of the Year at 20-1 odds. And to be the 6th Man of the Year in New York on a winning team, I don't think is likely for Jordan Clarkson at all. And I see Key as the better player right now than Jordan Clarkson. And I see Key as someone who will have more opportunity with the ball in his hands than Jordan Clarkson. And I see Key as someone who's going to score more points than Jordan Clarkson by a decent margin. So I see Keyonte George as the 6th, at least the 6th most likely, maybe even better, to win Sixth Man of the Year. I think Keyonte George will be among maybe even the highest points per game scorer off the bench in the NBA this season. That's my prediction, that Keyonte George will be a top 3, top 4 finisher in Sixth Man of the Year. And if he wins it, I would not be flabbergasted. So what do you guys think about that? I think Ace Bailey's the smartest projection, but the one that feels right to me right now when I look at it, I think Keyonte George is a really good wager. Not that I'm suggesting you should put everything on that, but I'm optimistic about Keyonte George this year. This is a guy that I think, he could contend for the Jazz's most improved, because everyone else thinks that 16 points a game on mediocre efficiency or maybe poor efficiency isn't someone that has a place in the future. I think he's got a lot to prove, and I think he could prove it by scoring 19 points a game and contending for Sixth Man of the Year. Thank you guys for listening to Locked On Jazz. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today and all the time. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast, where there's no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA today on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.